Today's Wednesday, August 14th. This is the Water Quality Management Committee. We meet from 4:30 to 6:30. Looks like we're running a little late already, but let's get started. First thing on our agenda today is David Iorio. Did I say that okay? Good. He's from the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center. He's been the point person on something called the Septic Utility Program, and he's going to talk to us about a proposal for what that would look like if the town of Falmouth was to adopt something like that. So, that introduction, David, if you need more, let me know. Otherwise,
Thanks.
the floor is yours.
Thank you.
And I think you were here before, so you know
I was.
we will do our best not to interrupt you during the
Okay.
presentation, but then ask questions at the end from the
Sure.
board, and then let the audience have a chance with any questions they might have.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for inviting me back. Some of the feedback that I received after my last presentation was really to be a little bit more specific as to what some of the services we can offer. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're really going to talk about services, our recommendation for services for Falmouth and your homeowners. Just a caveat to this, we really haven't had a lot of discussion on what your perceived needs are for the town. So what I really based this recommendation on was more on the feedback that I've received as I've gone from town to town, doing presentations, also with the current towns that I'm working with, the ideas that they're looking for as far as services. So know that whatever we talk about today can be tailored directly to what the needs really turn out to be for Falmouth. We can either add to it, we can take away. I think it's just important to know that there's a lot of flexibility when it comes to that. So the sub can basically offer comprehensive services to Falmouth and the homeowners, and really why we do that is to ensure optimal performance. Also regulatory compliance, and then really longevity for IA systems. These systems and the installation are not cheap. We really truly want to make sure they last as long as they can and they function as best as they can for the long term. By partnering with the SUP, Falmouth homeowners, operators, installers really can all benefit from consistent oversight, maintenance standards, streamlined processes, and then also just a third-party oversight, which we would supply. Overall, what we want to do for every town, including Falmouth, is really to support you all in your efforts with consistent, reliable, and cost-effective management solutions, septic management solutions. So as we move forward, some of the objectives I've kind of spoken a little bit about already, but these are the objectives that we're looking at. We want to address the critical need for consistent, reliable, and cost-effective IA septic management. The current paradigm that we have out there, it works. It doesn't work all the time, and I think as we move forward, as watershed plans turn into permits, I think it's going to be really important that this is consistent. What some of the services we will talk about today is operation and maintenance, sampling and inspection, installation, and then also education. And again, I list the goal again. Truly, our only goal is really for optimal system performance, regulatory compliance, and then the sustainability that I mentioned before. So some key themes you're going to hear throughout the recommendations that I'm going to make today is consistency and reliability, cost effectiveness, so truly providing competitive pricing and economies of scale for installation and services, a simplified payment process. So really trying to streamline the payment process for homeowners, operators and installers, really so that there can be cost savings, efficiency, reduced burden, really kind of free up the time for those individuals to do installation, operation, all those important things instead of having to worry about trying to collect payment from multiple homeowners. Obviously regulatory compliance. whether that is, Mass DEP's requirements, whether it's Falmouth's requirements, whichever of those requirements are actually going to turn out to be stricter. Local economic support. So a lot of, and you'll hear this more when I make the recommendations, a lot of the recommendations that you're going to hear are not, the SUP itself is not going to do everything. That's not what we were intended to do when we were formed. We don't want to take business away from local operators or installers. A lot of what we'll do will be outsourced to those individuals. What we're giving is oversight, and then also, especially when it comes to the sampling and the inspecting, is really to give that third-party oversight, that neutral oversight. And then lastly, education and certification. You're going to hear this. This is not specific to Falmouth, nor is it something that homeowners in Falmouth are going to need to actually pay for. This is actually Cape-wide that we're doing. So we're working on an education section that's within our website that will allow homeowners to really see what can they do to make sure that their systems are operating as best as they can, really having technology-specific information so that they know, for instance, there's systems out there that need to have a pump, and kind of knowing that you should not unplug that pump. And if you have anyone working in your yard, probably to go check afterwards to see that pump is still plugged in, because we have come across cases where it has been unplugged. And if that happens, the system is not going to function the way it's supposed to. And then certification is something that we've also been looking to do, where we can have the creators of these systems come into our Mass TEC site and really train installers, operators on their specific systems. That way, even if we're not involved with installation or operation and maintenance, at least we are still trying to get the information out there. So the priorities. So the priorities are, these are our priorities. We feel that most towns have the same priorities, which is regular inspections and maintenance, accurate sampling and data processing, competitive and managed installation processes, consistent and transparent pricing, streamlined payment process, a single point of contact for all system management, improved watershed quality adherence to permits, extended system lifespan and functionality, education on system maintenance, and certified installers and operators. And of course, those last two, as I mentioned before, are really Cape-wide. They're not town-specific. So now, kind of what you've all kind of been waiting for, which is what is the solution? So we came up with 3 recommendations. The first is a comprehensive operation and management plan. The second is limited operation and management, and what that really is calling for is just sampling and inspecting only. And this is on the part of the SUP. And then installation oversight is the last one. So the thing to know is that, again, these can be tailored specifically for Falmouth. They can be combined. You can have 1 and 3, 2 and 3. It really is based on what the needs of the town are. And it's also something that may not be necessary for the long term. And maybe some of these may be just important in the short term. So it's kind of important to know that this really is very flexible. So when we talk about comprehensive operation and maintenance, what does that basically mean? So what our plan really is, and what we've really spoken to other towns about, is creating an annual fee that is comprehensive of all the O&M services to all the homeowners that have an IA system. So it would be the same amount. It would not be different depending on a contract that someone has with an individual business. It would be the same. And to really ensure fairness and consistency across the entire community, it would include regular inspections, sampling, routine, and a certain number of non-routine service calls, and then also septic tank pump out. What we're trying to create is a situation for homeowners where they're paying an annual fee, and then they really don't have to worry about much else after that to pay for. What can be added to this, and this is truly technology specific, so we would need to know what the town is really considering as far as what technology will fit within their plan. So we could also figure out short-term or long-term, or both, a replacement of parts. And when I talk about short-term, we're really looking about parts that typically wear out between, up to maybe the 10 or 15-year mark. And then long-term, we're looking at parts parts of the system that wear out up to about 30 years. So again, it's really dependent on the specific system. And again, as I mentioned, some of the work will definitely be subcontracted to local contractors, because we definitely want to support local businesses and the economies of communities. Because we're not going to do all this work. So pricing, how are we figuring out the pricing? So as I said, the pricing is consistent across all the technologies, so we're not looking to charge different per technology. Part of that pricing also includes the fact that we do get a discount using the county lab, and truly, it kind of works similar to if you're talking about insurance, right? You charge a premium, this would be set for everyone, and we would basically take a look at the lifetime of the system, see all the costs that are involved, and we would come out with a number that would basically be the set fee. And so, it's hard for me to give you an exact amount. I can tell you with other towns, we are around the $900 to $1,000 per year is kind of the amount that we're looking at. But again, it's very specific to technology. So those amounts are truly guesstimate until I really find out more about what Falmouth is looking for as far as systems and what they want those systems, how they want them to perform ultimately. So the benefit to Falmouth is consistent maintenance, accurate reporting, single point of contact, and then also there could be, and this is a big could be because it's kind of been mentioned in certain meetings, but if your systems are managed through an RME, there could be benefits through DEP as well. The current paradigm of how these are being managed is not consistent, and we at the SUP, we oversee the IA database, so we see how it's not consistent. We also have been working for the creators of certain technologies to do their sampling and inspecting, and the reason that they contracted with us is because there's not immediate communication when something is not working, especially when it revolves around test results. There's not always a communication to them that these test results don't look really correct for what the system should be doing. And so there's always a lag. And I think as we move into watershed plans and permits, it's going to be very important to know immediately if a system is not performing the way it's supposed to. By the time the groundwater from these systems get into the watershed, it could very well be a year, right? It depends how far away that home is from the actual watershed. And I think the only thing that we can do is truly to make sure that every part of our watershed plan is performing how we forecasted it to perform. And so the immediate attention to these systems is extremely important, extremely important. So to the homeowner, again, it's a simplified payment plan. They're paying the SUP. They could also pay Falmouth, and Falmouth could actually pay the SUP to do the work, but they could pay the SUP directly through our website. We already have payment portals created. We receive payments for Aquafund and things like that. So all that technology is already created for us. Also for them, there's very minimal extra charges, right? They're paying that one annual fee, and then there's pretty much no surprises for them later on down the road that they have to pay for something extra. And then as far as benefits to operators, guaranteed payment. They're being paid by the SUP, right? So instead of focusing their attentions on collecting payments from individual homeowners, they're now just have one source, which is us. And we hope that we always pay on time. So they could really focus all of their efforts, instead of collecting payments, they could really focus on the increased amount of systems that are going to need O&M. So our second recommendation is very similar to the first. The only difference is, the only thing that the SUP is really doing is going to be the sampling and inspecting. And again, we would be consistent with our pricing for all IA technology. It would be the same. The only thing dependent on this truly is going to be how frequently it needs to be sampled, right? And so that's just going to be based on Mass DEP and also Falmouth's regulations. So it's going to include regular inspections and sampling, distribution of the reports on a timely manner to those individuals that need to receive those reports, entering the data into our IA database so that you as a town can look at it, and also Mass DEP can look at it. And again, I think we have the view from managing the IA database and knowing that currently, under the way things are being done, this is not the case. Information is not timely added to the database. And then again, I mentioned this earlier, just immediately troubleshooting. If we're out there, it doesn't take us really that much more time to really see if a system is not performing the way it's supposed to from our field data, but then also once we get the labs. We can really troubleshoot from the moment we receive that information. Even though we may not be doing the O&M, we can notify the homeowner, we can notify the company who created the machine, we can notify the person who has the O&M contract. So pretty much we could be as quick as possible. And then as far as the benefits go, they're very similar to the first section. Again, it's pretty much the same, consistent pricing over all technologies. Again, it includes a discount that we get from the lab because it's part of the county. The benefit to Falmouth is really having an impartial third-party oversight. You know, most of our information that's put into the IA database is obviously through a second party, through O&M contractors, and this would give a third-party oversight, a party that's impartial, that the only thing that we really want to make sure is happening is that the systems are working the way you wanted them to work in your watershed plan. Timely access of data, and of course, hopefully all of this will increase confidence. And then for the homeowner, it's that consistent pricing, and again, the impartial oversight, and really us really communicating when a system does not seem to be performing the way it should be immediately, so hopefully it won't be a costly repair later on down the road because it hasn't been addressed immediately. So the last recommendation is installation oversight. So something that we've seen, and we've seen this through our AquaFund program, is just a difference of how much it's costing to install the same type of system. We had a property on the Outer Cape. The homeowner went out to bid. It was the same system, obviously the same property. They got bids back from $45,000 to $100,000. And so the only thing that was different in all of that was the actual installation cost. Supply and demand, right? If more systems are going to be going in across the Cape, the demand is going to be higher, but we may still have the same number of installers, or we may have installers coming from off Cape, which we're starting to see as well. That's going to drive cost up. So one way that you could try to prevent that is going out to bid for multiple projects at the same time. Now, on a town level, you can do that, right? If you decide you want to do a phase approach, so you're going to be putting systems in within a neighborhood similar to a sewer, you could go out to bid for all of those systems at one time, those installations at one time. And hopefully, with economies of scale, you can drive down the cost for each homeowner. On the sub-level, because we are an entity that is throughout the county, if the towns within a region agree for us to do it for all of them, we could actually go out to bid, not on a per town level, but we could go out on a regional level. And where I think that comes into play is on the regulations. So if you're not going to do a phased approach, then it'll probably be regulations like a title change, or a failed system, or new construction, or a sale of a home. That's a little bit harder to predict, so you may not be able to go out to bid for multiple projects if that's the case. So what is the pricing? So it's very similar to a construction manager. It's a percentage, probably somewhere around the 5% or less. The oversight that we would give is not just for competitive pricing through a bidding process, but it's also really making sure that these systems are being installed correctly. IA systems are not identical to Title V's, and installers truly need to know how to install them. We've seen situations where they have not been installed correctly. They have not, the systems weigh more, they settle, pipes break, and so you have problems even before the system is even put into use that need to be corrected. For the homeowner, the benefit, again, is a simplified payment pricing, and then avoidance of costly mistakes even before they start using the system. And for the operator, the benefit truly is the oversight of making sure the system is installed correctly, reducing the risk of liability and risk, and then streamlining the payment process, because again, if we're going out to multiple bids, the payments would be coming from the SUP. And then the last part is really just the education and certification. Not so much a recommendation, but just an awareness of what the SUP is doing, is preparing to do Cape-wide. And I spoke about all of these before. You know, the certifications isn't something that would be mandatory. That's not something that we at the county can do. Obviously, towns can make that as a requirement through their regulations, but we're offering it more along the lines from our side of it is just another way to make sure these systems are going to be maintained correctly and also installed correctly. And so I think truly in conclusion, this pretty much says everything that I've said throughout the whole presentation. All the recommendations that we made really was to ensure that these systems are going to be well maintained and operate the way you want them to operate in your plan, your watershed plan. And we think the importance is there because of the fact that, especially for the first year or couple of years, you're not going to really necessarily see the results in your watershed. You're going to have to rely that these are working the way you wanted them to work. And the quicker that we can determine that they're not working that way, I think that's the most effective that will be. Additionally, we're trying to create a situation for homeowners that they're paying one price. We want to keep the cost down for them, make it more similar, even though I hate to compare this, but to a sewer, right? To a homeowner who has a sewer. Try to make it basically a one price. They don't have to worry about anything else. And then also having the dedication of third-party eyes and our experience that we have through Mass TC and actually currently working with individuals in doing this. So that's pretty much the end. Any questions?
Probably not. No.
I have several, but you want to go in order, probably.
No, I'll start with you.
Oh, okay. That might be a mistake.
I'll learn.
Forgive me, but I have to put my fiduciary responsibility to Falmouth purchasing agent hat on and treat you the same way I would treat someone coming to propose to put solar panels on my house. How many customers do you have already?
We have 2 customers already. And
Towns or homeowners?
No, not towns. These are not-for-profit and a manufacturer of a current septic system.
Okay. And the thing that worries me, not about your system, I think this is great, but for the town, is we're looking for a high-performance system, not 19 milligrams, but under 10.
Right.
And it's my understanding that there's only one serious one out there now that's commercially available.
There's 2 on there's 2 on the banner, so I'm not really.
Okay.
There's 2 on the banner, and one of them I believe is at 11. But if you're doing a watershed plan, you can actually use what the system is. You can determine what you say that system is going to perform. So you can use historical data for that
Let him
system.
go ahead. I think he was asking a question. There's not so much how many are approved.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. In other words, I'm looking forward to the time when there will be real competitive pressure on pricing. Do you know when that will be? Or have any guesses when it will be?
I don't. I don't. There are other systems out there, but they're not getting quite as good. And to your point, if you have 2 systems, there may not be as much pressure as if you had 6 or 7, right? So
Or even 3.
or even 3. But so far, those are the only two.
And you said, Kristen gave us your presentation ahead of time, so it mentioned that you're still negotiating pricing, but you said you thought it would be about 900 to 1,000 per
So
per
that
year.
is based on, so we are working currently with other towns. We haven't been contracted with those towns, so the pricing that I just gave you was very specific to a particular town with the technologies that they're using. So that was to give you kind of a ballpark, to let you know kind of where our idea is, where we would love that amount to be, because we think that amount is very competitive to what customers are paying for currently. What we see come across our desk typically for a system that needs to be tested more than once a year, and inspected or sampled and inspected more than once a year, we're seeing about $1,200, and that's not really all inclusive to what we're talking about.
But there were three options. The third one was installation.
Right, and
which of
that's
course
something
is
different.
separate.
Right, that's separate.
But the first two was basically the plain vanilla plan and the super duper plan.
Yeah, yep,
And so the 900 or 1,000 is the high level plan?
that's the high level.
Okay. And, oh, you said you wanted the price, this is my last question, to be consistent across technologies. I mean, I can certainly understand what you would mean if you said consistent across towns or customers, that you're not gonna gouge us and give Mashpee a good deal.
Right.
That's very smart. But what do you mean when you say consistent across technologies?
So,
Well, I mean, what if there's some people in Brewster buy a stupid expensive system and we buy a good inexpensive system? You're not going to give them a discount at our expense, I hope.
no, so when, I really was talking town-specific. So and the reason is because it depends on the technologies. So if, let's say you decide to go with the two technologies right now that are on the banner list, right? If you're gonna go with those two technologies, then I want the homeowner that has technology A pay the same as the homeowner that has technology B. And that's within your plan in your town, because these are the two systems that you're looking at. And you want them to achieve this certain amount. So if you have a town that maybe doesn't need to get 10, maybe they can get 19 based on their plan, then that pricing may look a little bit different, right? And I think it's something too where, as some of those systems, because right now part of the cost really is how often you have to go out and sample it, right, and inspect it. So, if we can start doing more remote, if systems can start to incorporate more of remote sensors that prevents having to go out, that will save money. And I think also as certain systems become general use and don't need to maybe be inspected or sampled as often, that also will lower cost. So that amount could fluctuate. So one year it could be, let's say, I'm just gonna use this, it could be 1,000, but the following year it might be less because of the fact that now the systems that are being used are all general use.
Thank you.
I'm gonna use the seesaw approach. Ed,
Oh,
you
okay,
go next then.
okay. So you said you do not currently have any signed contracts with towns, but you are in discussions with them. And the option one is seems like it might come in at $900 to $1,000 starting point, and that's good. At least we got an idea, order of magnitude where
I
we
mean,
are.
that's our aim. That's our aim.
Yeah, what about option two? You didn't put a number on that. Do you have a
That one's a little bit.
estimate?
Yeah, it's a little bit trickier because of not knowing the technology. Not knowing how often we would need to go out and sample it. It's a little bit harder to put a price on that at this point.
Okay, fair enough. But isn't right now, all of the systems that are under any approval, whether it's conditional or general use already approved, the DEP is saying, here's how often you shall sample them, until they've had a couple of years of actual hitting their target, and then it relaxes. I think it starts out with 4 times a year, then goes to 2, and then maybe to 1. And you talked about remote checking or monitoring. Is that something you see DEP in any reasonable future allowing, or are they going to still insist on picking a sample out of the D box and et cetera, et cetera.
I do think with remote sampling, I think what you'll see from DEP is probably, you know, a more relaxed view of having to go out consistently. Because in some of the past, they've wanted people to go out monthly. And I think with the remote sensors, that could change to where it doesn't have to be as frequent. There's no definitive statement on that, but I do think that once they can see that it works, I think the more systems that have it, I think we could see hopefully a change in the future, but there's nothing definitive. They haven't said anything positively on it.
Yeah, it seems they're very slow to change and, you know, obviously.
Yeah.
And, you know, very rigid in what they're saying right now. And I suspect it's going to be a long haul before they, yeah, okay, you can do this remote. Some months back when the people from Nitro made a presentation, they said, well, eventually, you know, just remote monitor the air pressures there and it's good. But yeah, I don't know how long it's going to take DEP to come into that. But another question that came to my mind is there are roughly a couple of hundred existing systems in Falmouth now. And it's kind of it all falls down ultimately to the Board of Health to monitor compliance performance. Would you see a place for those existing systems to then enroll in the SUP once things are up and running, so that the old systems can have the benefits of the economies of scale of sampling and testing and all that?
Absolutely, and I mean, that's to the point of what I said, it's really tailored to the needs of the town. So if that's something that the town wants to make available to all of the homeowners, we would definitely want to help them. Because even if their system, you know, even if it's a system that perhaps is not targeted, that's not in a nitrogen-sensitive area specifically, it doesn't necessarily need to be upgraded, we would still want to help them. I mean, we want to create a situation where, you know, we're still trying to do the best for every individual system that's out there and homeowner.
Yeah, there's some good ones and some awful ones and everything in between.
Right.
And the more you can get, I would think, enrolled in the SUP, then the more your costs are spread over a larger base. So
Absolutely.
there seems to be an awful lot of different approaches that towns are taking, Cape-wide and including the Vineyard, in how to start down the IA mandate trail. Whether it's, you know, everything in the town or everything in a zone. I think that Tisbury's got like 1,500 that are under the gun to thou shalt do it and thou shalt do it under some very strict triggers. Other towns are saying anybody within 1,000 feet of a impaired watershed. Mashpee's taking that. The whole question we've been debating as a committee of subsidies by the town for IAs. I don't know of any other towns that are actively pursuing that. And you
Subsidy
may.
question for the subsidy.
Yes,
Save the
it's a
subsidy
separate question, but I wonder, are you in your dialogues with towns running into this, well, Falmouth's going this way, and Mashpee's going here, and Tisbury's over there, and they're all different approaches to the common problem, and maybe there's a benefit that you can bring to the table to kind of help coordinate that and put some logic behind it.
So, you know, I know of, Wellfleet obtained SRF funding commitment, and so I know they've been working on trying to utilize those funds for systems, to actually get systems for so basically borrowing against the SRF for these IA systems. So I know that's what they've been thinking about, how can they do that. I don't know necessarily what their repayment thoughts are on that. But that is, they were kind of pre-approved for that, and so they're working out the details. The one hiccup with that was that in order to access that funding, typically, like if you're doing it for a sewer system, they want to see all the plans. And obviously with an IA system, you know, they go in not all together unless you're doing, again, like a phased approach. So how can you do that if you don't have a specific plan? And I think last I heard that they would be able to submit more of a general plans instead of having to be specific so that they could access the SRF funding. So that's one thought. I know that, you know, at, you know, the Aqua Fund, we've been thinking about, you know, is there a way that those funds can somehow be used, and perhaps, you know, towns could maybe pay a portion of of those loans off for individual homeowners to kind of help them. And then, there are different ways that you maybe can obtain income, whether it's through taxation or something like that. But I think that's a discussion that is kind of off this topic, and I think
Yes.
it's something that really, we have to think of more ideas, because a lot of people are gonna have to spend a lot of money soon. Right now, obviously, they can borrow from Aquafund, and, there's tax credits, but, other than that, there's not other resources for these individuals.
Yeah, I see great benefits to setting up a SUP like this, to the economies of scale, that get the burden off of an already overworked Board of Health and a Board of Health agent to try and monitor compliances and use, common technologies and help the homeowners and help the towns manage this, and also help the state, and to have one common voice from the Cape talking to the DEP about the issues that arise as we move forward with this. So I think it's great that you guys are doing this, and look forward to continuing the dialogue. So,
John?
I'm very impressed with the evolution of the idea of the subs. It's really, you've done really a nice job of working that to a point where I think it's exactly what the town is going to want to be thinking about. I mean, one of the things we would think about is how much do you burden the homeowner with, rather than contracting with the town through something like a sewer charge, so that you try and take things off the homeowner's plate. The other question I had was, how has the dialogue, as you've developed this plan that's pretty now well formed, how have you done with the dialogue with DEP about getting them on board, helping them streamlining the O&M process as we move ahead? I think that, to me, is really one of the critical pieces to make this thing really work.
The dialogue is ongoing. We are looking to plan a meeting in the early fall with DEP, EPA, a lot of other parties, to really talk about just what you're mentioning and other concerns. We're reaching a point now on the Cape where towns are changing their regulations. More systems are going to start going in. And so I think it is a time that we need to have all of those key players, all the government key players, to really sit down and have that conversation. So that is something that we're actively coordinating right now. And we're hoping sometime
I'm thinking about that.
in October.
Is that something where you would be helped by having the individual towns at the table with you when you chat with DEP, or the Coalition for Buzzards Bay?
Yeah.
In our early discussions with DEP, they were fairly reluctant to be terribly imaginative. And so I think as you develop the plan to sit down with them, any help that the town could provide or that the coalition could provide, I think would be very useful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, I think what we're trying to plan for the fall is going to be the first, I think, of many discussions that we need to have with all those players, right? It's important. Government tends to be hesitant. I mean, it's just things move a little bit slower when you're dealing with government. And so I think that's par for the course, but I also think they need to kind of be realistic and see what the changes are happening. And I think that's kind of what they've been doing. I think they've just been sitting back and watching and seeing what the progression has been like. But I think the discussion that we're going to have in the fall is going to be really good.
You okay, John?
The only, basically, everyone's touched on all the comments and questions I would have had. The financing one, you touched on very briefly.
Right.
And I think that could be quite important, because it's a big hit for a lot of people to have to pay to install one of these. So if there's a way that you can help coordinate that as well, I think that would be very useful.
Absolutely, and I think, why I was able to come up with numbers for some of the other towns I'm working with is because I knew, what their sampling requirement was, right? So I knew this is what they were planning to do going forward with their watershed plan. Because it's important to know how often, because a town can choose to sample and inspect more frequently than what the guidance is for DEP. So that's an important, because obviously the more times you go out, the more costly it is. But then also knowing the technologies. And one of the things that we've actually started doing is now speaking with those technologies, because, we're also a little bit concerned with, you talked about supply and demand. What happens if every town on the Cape decides they want systems that do 10? Well, what happens, right? We have 2. So how, can they produce those systems? Because if they can't, now towns may have to have systems installed that don't do as well. And what does that do to your watershed plan? You have to compensate for it somewhere, right? So knowing that as well is very helpful, because then it's very easy for me to kind of go out and see typically what's a cost for replacing something on a specific system. So, once I have that information, I can definitely come back with numbers that are definitely more within a ballpark than just theoretical at this point.
I mean, that was something that this committee has been discussing, is if the town were to acquire 1,000, 5,000, however many systems from the supplier, it makes me a little nervous if we're talking about one supplier, because there's no competition there. But, and it sounds to me like you're talking about doing that potentially on a regional scale rather than a town-wide scale, which, as you point out, makes it even more meaningful, so.
And I also, again, I think our worry is not just with the technology, it truly is with the installation cost.
Right, that's the financing I was concerned with, is the install. I think monitoring, people can handle the monitoring, it's great if you can get them a deal, on the lab costs and all that, that's very useful, but it's the initial installation that's expensive.
Agreed.
Some of the things that we have been talking about are things like, well, what do you do about landscaping? That's kind of very site-specific, it's not really part of the actual installation of the unit.
Right.
Should there be a cap, on any help you might give, et cetera, but, but I agree with Ed, this is, could be, and John, this could be very useful, so.
Tom?
Yeah, I basically agree with Ken's statement. Most of the questions, concerns I had have been addressed, and I think it's a very attractive way for us to approach this problem. It sounds very good to me.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I agree with all the previous speakers. The question I have is more on the education and the certification process. It seems like if this takes off, and it sounds like everybody supports it, you're gonna need engineers, installers, a whole army of people with pretty specific skill sets to get out in the field in the not-too-distant future to make this work. Are these plans underway now, where we're starting to set up training centers and engage the contractors and letting them know that this could blossom into something that they never probably even imagined on a scale that, to get ready so that when we need to act, we're ready to act?
No, we are. We should have, our space should be finished by late fall. So we'll have the space. And as far as contractors, I've started to speak with them. And so far, not contractors, the creators of the technologies, the manufacturers, I've started to speak with them. And so far, they're happy, because that's one of the biggest obstacles they've had, their systems not being installed correctly. And many times them wanting to do the installation themselves or coordinate it. And they're not gonna have the time to do that if they have to manufacture more. So they're all for it. I think it's important. I don't think education, I don't think anyone would say no to education, but so far, the individuals I've spoken to, they're happy. They're happy about it. And like I said, our space should be available probably if there's no delays by the late fall.
Add to that a little bit. So I'm the other guy on the slide there, Brian Bungaro. You all probably know me, but those who don't. So yeah, as David said, we're in the process of putting together some of that training space. In fact, the building arrives like Wednesday next week to start putting it together, which is pretty exciting for us. Anybody who's been out to the test center knows it's pretty Spartan out there, so this will be like a real thing. And then we're also working pretty closely with some other organizations on additional funding to bring more capacity out to the test center. And as I'm sure you're all aware, JBCC as the organization is looking at offloading sections of that piece of property that they have on the southern end of the base. So we're also keeping close tabs on that and where we can fit that in with some of our workforce development thoughts. I've also been meeting with both of our regional tech schools, so Cape Cod Tech and Upper Cape Tech. They both have a lot of interest in developing more programming to get their students into a pathway, because these are like guaranteed jobs, and it's work that's never going to go away. So they have a lot of interest in developing programming there. And I've also met with President of 4Cs a number of times about developing programming at that level, because we need to not only get to and interest those who are in high school right now, we also need to be targeting those mid-career changers, the police officers who are like, I don't want to do this anymore. And believe me, there are a lot more that apply for our jobs as police officers than you might think. So I want to make sure that we're building in that workforce development piece, because if we don't have the staff and we don't have the capacity to actually design systems, to do the survey work, to do the installations, to do the O&M, we're all going to fall flat on our faces. And we've also been in conversations with DEP about how can we more custom tailor the licensure process for operators so that it's really geared more towards on-site systems. Right now, to operate a system out in the field, you have to be a wastewater treatment plant operator grade 4. And if any of you have studied for that test or have taken it, it's almost completely irrelevant to on-site wastewater treatment systems. But that's the gold standard that they use. So we want to develop more targeted training toward the on-site world, so that whoever's out in the field is getting not just training and not just having to do continuing education, that they're getting relevant continuing education and training in these things. And at the broader picture of wastewater, we need a lot of those same folks for all of our treatment plants as well. So as a region, I think it's really important that we're looking at this workforce development piece and how do we get our treatment plant operators? We're going to need chief operators. We're going to need, the grade 4s and the grade 7s at our plants. We're going to need installers for pipelines and stuff. So, really important aspect that we're looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I don't know if I'm asking a question or making a statement, but in Falmouth, and I'm going to the Little Pond Sewer Project, there was an absolute, the town will not go on to private property and do work, okay? People will have their private property and can't go on. So we got around that a little bit by buying the E1s, and then contractors came and picked them up, but the town did not go on to private property. A big component of what you're putting out there involves having to go on to private property. And I'm not sure how, as we sit here today, that can be easily or legally done. That's a factor. I do know that under the state law, Mass General Law, there's a specific Mass General Law that allows a water meter reader to go onto private property for the purpose of reading a water meter. I would imagine we would need some form of a state law similar to that to be in place. Okay? The other side of it is, I'm not quite sure what the framework needs to be or how it happens, that you could say, because you're in an IA-defined zone, you now must pay the town. I would defer to town council for a legal opinion on how that can be implemented. I know that we have structures, again, through Mass General Law for how you can set wastewater fees and how you can set water fees, and then the town annually adjusts those things, but they're working within a fairly structured legal framework, and I don't know that exists yet for the SUP. okay? I think that's something that, as we're talking this through or looking at possibilities, seems to me that that's maybe part of the work you need to be doing, and we need to be supporting you to get those state laws, that legal framework in place. Because homeowners are quite often fussy about who comes onto their property and what they do. So that's my sort of big comment.
Can I add 20 seconds to that? Just, it's a tiny part of it. Consider also building inspectors and Board of Health inspectors of restaurants.
But those all flow out, yeah. So the Board of Health has got some extra powers beyond just regular things.
And building inspectors.
Well, you pull a building permit, and in order to get the building permit, you have to allow inspectors to come in and inspect it,
No,
okay?
I'm just saying, it's likely that what you're proposing will pass if it hasn't already. And of course, you have all the emergency workers.
Yeah, I'm-
Fire, police, ambulance.
Yeah, they-
But
I'm
you'd say
just-
that they're emergencies, but.
Yeah, I'm just saying, we should make sure that it's not a casual, oh, we're gonna do this, and people are gonna come on the property and measure things. We need to have a structure in place that's very clear about who can go on the property and what they can do, and that it's signed off on, okay?
I'd just add one piece to that, which is Title V, which allows already Board of Health reasonable access at reasonable times. So,
Board of Health, yeah.
yeah, and they can delegate their authority, which they do as a health agent, so.
Okay. Again, I like to be more upfront. If we're dealing with hundreds or thousands of homeowners, I don't want to point to some little line in Title V and say, gotcha. Okay, I'd rather have it be very clear what we're doing, and that there is a structure and a legal basis where their rights are protected and our need to access is permitted.
Yep, believe me, I'm from upstate New York, I got a lot of respect for private property, so that's
Right?
the way we shoot things up anyway.
I'm going to open it up to the audience if there's any questions from the audience. Yeah, Matt?
Matt Hanley from Surfrider Foundation. First of all, I want to thank David and Brian for their work. This was a great presentation. They put a lot of detail, a lot of thought into this. As an organization, Surfrider is concerned about nutrients getting into our watersheds and ends up in our oceans. But one of the reasons I like this program is because it helps towns break out of their silos. And we're bringing continuity to all of the Cape. This program would make sure that the technology is being monitored with consistency. Those data points that are being collected, at a county level is going to give us a better presentation of performance over a broader spectrum. Andrew Gottlieb of APCC has been talking about bringing continuity and sharing data. This would go a long way. Also, I have a lot of respect for our Board of Health, and they're already swamped with the amount of work they have to do. For a town, as a town, to put additional work with these IA systems in their lap, how are we going to justify that? They're definitely going to have to grow our health department. Something like this would alleviate some of the burden on our health department, let them focus on their day-to-day, protecting our citizens at our restaurants and some of the emergencies. Obviously, there's going to be paperwork and cooperation between the county and our Board of Health. I would urge Mass TC to work with the Buzzards Bay Coalition. Buzzards Bay Coalition's been running their AI monitoring system for 7-8 years now. And so I think that would answer a lot of questions as far as like manpower and budget, realistic expectations, like how much time does it actually take per system, that would take the learning curve out and really keep something like that from falling, like you said, Brian, saying falling flat on your face. When you have that groundwork already laid out with the good work of the Buzzards Bay Coalition, I think we could have a successful program. And I just want to say I appreciate all the mindful comments of the board. You really look at everything that's being presented to you in very factual and educated way. Thank you.
Doug?
Hi, Doug Brown, Select Board. So one question is for the Mastech people. If all the towns on the Cape decide this is a great idea, like it sounds like everyone here thinks, are you guys going to be able to scale up and do all those, or do we have to get in early to be a part of this? That's one question. I know you probably don't have the answer yet. Another one would be that maybe the arrangement between these folks could be sort of a contractual arrangement, so they'd be a contractor rather than a town's actual employee, because I mean, I think that's what it's going to be anyway, so maybe that might not be as much of an urgency. And then the third thing was, last time I was here, I spoke a little bit against the idea of buying a lot of these septic tanks, and then John spoke, and I was a little more convinced of the efficiency factor of how you could have, more uniform monitoring, and maybe it is a better idea than I first realized. But I would be concerned that we make sure we get the things not just provisionally approved, because what if they only temporarily provisionally approve them and we got 1,000 of them and they say, oh, we've decided they don't work, and so they would have to be like regularly approved, wouldn't they, before we would buy them?
I wouldn't suggest that this board make a motion to accept anything other than an approved system.
Right. And then the last point on that was, you could take out the complication part of it, because the supplier could deliver them to some site. I don't know where it would be, maybe the leaf dump, or maybe it'd have to be more secure. Maybe it would be the old dump. Maybe there's some place out there rather than the DPW shed. But maybe then the contractor would be responsible to go and pick them up from there and bring them to the person's site rather than the DPW getting involved with it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's called drop shipping.
Yeah. Okay,
Well,
that's
once we
it.
get the outfall in, we've got all that land up at the wastewater plant that we could use.
Excellent. Thanks.
Anybody else? Lauren?
Corin Peterson from the Buzzards Bay Coalition, and I want to thank David and Brian, and just to follow up on what Matt said, so of the more than 30 systems we have in West Falmouth, we've been doing the monitoring, but we did contract directly with the SUP for their sampling and some O&M on those systems. Super positive experience, with homeowners and with the Buzzards Bay Coalition, so just wanted to underscore that they are not just pretty faces, but they're actually, they're doing the real work.
Okay, thank you. Okay. There's no more questions. We'll move on to the next agenda item. Steve Layton's going to have been our point person on this, but it's a continued discussion on formulating a recommendation regarding IA subsidies.
So if Kristen could put up the first and only slide. I happened to run into this the other day, and it's the spirit in which I'm trying to do this. I'd never heard of that guy before, but it just,
You never heard of Joseph?
no?
Oh, neither did I.
As I said, the current 5-page draft is not intended as our export document. It's just to focus our reasoning. And I've spoken to the town finance director who's here. He is maybe talking to town council about various clever ways to handle the financing of this. But my only goal today in this document is to see if I can get this board to agree that IAs and UDs provide absolutely zero value to the homeowner. Now, before you have a heart attack or something, let me explain what I mean by that. And I'm saying there's no betterment. Everybody has to put in a septic system upgrade for their own health and literally the value of their property. When you put in a sewer, you no longer have to manage the septic system. There's less real estate occupied on your property, and in some cases you can build more bedrooms, which are tangible economic benefits. An IA or a UD is not a substitute for any of those considered. It's a module that adds to those and does tremendous benefit for the community as a whole, by cleaning up the estuaries, but it is only an expense to the homeowner. So when the town makes geo-boundaries, which are somewhat, they're thought through, but they are not the whole watershed, if to the extent that you do that, you're putting a cost burden on a particular group of homeowners, and they're doing, only because they're doing something for the whole community. So where you go from there, it starts to get more complicated. There are reasons not to give a complete 100% subsidy, but I would, at the last meeting, there were a couple of arguments about how actually there was some value to it. I hope I logically rebutted those in that document. I have other rebuttals if those didn't work.
Do you want to have discussion on point by point, or do you want to go through the whole thing?
Does anybody still think that there's any tangible benefit to IAs and UDs to that homeowner over and above those which accrue to his next-door neighbor who's next to the same estuary who doesn't put one in? I'm not saying he doesn't benefit from the clean estuary, like all of us will. But what's the benefit to being that one? And let me just give one crazy example. Suppose on the low-pressure sewer system around Little Pond, suppose that technically it turned out that to make it work, you needed a special booster pump every 10th house. And for technical reasons, it couldn't be in the road, which would be the obvious place to put it, but it had to be on somebody's property. It would be absurd to say that you make those 10% of the homeowners pay for that. And I just want to hear from everybody, just on that one point of whether there's any value, not how we're going to solve the problem. But do you agree with the premise? It doesn't.
You want to go down the line?
It's up to you how you call it.
It's quaking.
Well, you know, I disagree with the premise because I think there is a benefit. And one is, by doing the IAs in geo-boundaries as the path we are taking as a committee to recommend to the town fathers, the select board, that you are avoiding the cost of everybody in the entire town putting in IAs. You are avoiding, and cost avoidance is a tangible benefit.
Oh, absolutely.
Let us say that.
That's one of my reasons, is that the
Versus-
people, I mean, the individuals who put it in are paying for it and the other ones who don't have to put it in are saving having to pay for putting one in themselves if we didn't solve the watershed problem.
Correct. I'm talking, to finish, the IA versus, we can't do that, we must sewer. But guess what that sewer's gonna cost, because each house is 300 yards from their nearest neighbor. So the cost of those sewer lines that you will avoid by putting in an IA, you are avoiding that cost of extensive, extremely expensive sewering. Little Pond Sewer Zone, the betterment was $13,000 some odd dollars and change. To sewer some of these far-flung watersheds and geo-boundaries might cost 10 times that per house, 5 times. You're avoiding that cost. The cost avoidance is a tangible benefit.
That's a separate issue. I'm not saying whether in a given watershed you use sewers or IAs. What you said about the distances and so on is all correct. I'm talking about the unfairness of a subset of a watershed if, to the extent that they are made to pay for the systems and their next-door neighbor doesn't. The next-door neighbor is also saving that sewer cost. That's another community benefit.
Right. Continue with the sewer analogy then. Some people in Falmouth Heights were required to put in a sewer. Mandated, thou must connect, thou must pay 70% of the cost of the lines, the town will subsidize 30%. Your next-door neighbor on the other side of the street or the next street over didn't have to do it. He didn't have to pay that.
And
He-
he
he
didn't
got
get any
the-
benefit to his property.
No, but he didn't have to pay that. So he's sitting there very happy with his old-fashioned Title V, or maybe even a cesspool that's still functioning, because he only uses it 8 or 10 weeks out of the year, if that. So he did not have to pay that, but his neighbor did. Was there a fairness issue there? Should have the
I
town
live
paid
in-
100% of that cost? instead of
In
30?
Falmouth, there are various what I call magic triangles.
Mm-hmm.
Places where your sewage goes out to Vineyard Sound or Buzzards Bay. And so you don't have to worry about any of this, because you're not in a watershed. You're just in the watershed of the sound or something. And so by proposing this, I'm saying I'm willing to take on my taxes the part of the cost of people who don't live in these magic triangles, putting in a system that will keep the estuary clean, that we'll all benefit from. I'm not jealous of them, and the same with the sewers. You know, this is too much back and forth here.
No, it's okay. I'm bothered a little bit, Steve, by the fact that you're trying to make some value judgment relative to an IA versus a sewer.
No,
I'm
I'm not.
Let me finish. The term betterment is used relative to sewers because within state law, there is some very specific language that allows a town to do things like water mains, road repairs, and put sewers in, and to have a portion of those costs paid for by the abutters to that public development. That's public things being put into the road, and the person abutting it has to pay something. Now, when the sewer shows up, the town doesn't provide any extra money or do anything for the portion that's on the property owner's property. Okay? To turn around and sort of define that an IA is a cost to the homeowner, and to tie it to this concept of betterment or better use or whatever, I think it subtracts, I guess I don't see why making all of that distinction is important to the concept of whether or not a subsidy is available for people that have to be put an IEA in on their property. I don't understand your insistence that we have to make a distinction.
Steve wants
with
it
all
to be
due
100% subsidy.
I know he's got stuff later on, but I'm just saying, this whole thing in here about whether a sewer betterment is good for a homeowner versus mandated IAs is or isn't good for a homeowner, I don't know what it does relative, at the end of the day, to deciding the subsidy.
Well, I submit with all due respect that looking at betterment that way is what I would call bureaucratic and legalese. Just saying, well, the other things have betterments, so do these with betterments. I'm saying morally and ethically, there are clear physical costs, which David just pointed out. There are going to be substantial annual O&M costs as well for an IA. And physically, the IA does not bring any benefit to the homeowner that doesn't accrue equally to all the residents of the watershed.
I disagree. I think we've seen now a number of these watershed plans and geo-boundaries proposed. The folks who are putting those in are in the vicinity, direct abutters to the watershed, to the water body. They're improving the water body right next to them. They get extra benefit from that. We already have in place an accepted 70-30 split. I think to do something different, so I think there should be a subsidy, Steve. I just don't think it should be 100%. Let's not create a double standard. If you were on the sewer, you got, 30% from the taxpayer. If you're on putting in a septic system, you get 100%. That's just ripe to create a lot of dissension. It seems to me we should just go with what we've got it's hard to quantify. I mean, you have some valid points about, you can add bedrooms, you can, we've seen expansion of homes on Little Pond in response to the construction of the sewer. But it's hard to put a precise number on those and then say, well, those people don't deserve a 30%,
Well, I'm not trying to change the 70-30 split for sewers. I mean, that's.
No, I know
water
that,
over
but
the
I'm
dam,
just saying
we're
we have
creating
that
new
as a
thing here.
general sort of precedent, and I think, Ed's pointed out, it is more complicated, because there are possibilities of tax credit benefits and
That's
the
getting into
cost
the
varies,
solution.
all of that, but I still think it's possible to come up with some kind of a formula that honors the initial concept of the homeowner putting it in, covers 70% of the cost, taxpayer, general taxpayer, provides a subsidy of up to 30%.
I submit you're falling into the same legalese bureaucratic trap of saying it's because it was 70-30 for sewers.
It's not a
No, no,
legalese.
I
It's a
waited patiently.
It's
I
not
thought you
because
were
of a legalese trap, it's because of a sense of, we have in place a precedent that's accepted, and I don't want to fight yet another battle about how we divvy up the cost.
Are you finished?
Yeah, now I am.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt you. You mentioned figuring out the exact costs. It doesn't involve figuring out anything exact costs. And by the way, I am proposing, but I don't want to get into the solution, it's not 100% because I'm proposing it for practical reasons. You want to keep it less than 100% like the landscaping. You don't want the town to start paying for people's landscaping. But the basic costs are, the fact is that the benefit, the reason you don't have to do any calculations is the benefit of the system to the homeowner is zero.
That's what I don't agree with.
With possible exception that maybe you're a little bit closer to the watershed. And I did initially drop that off as a reasoning on John's advice, because I had phrased it in the fact that maybe the people at the waterfront have more money, so you can soak them more. And although
Soak them with
in an
what?
official- In
Effluent?
an official document, you wouldn't use the word soak. But so we dropped that out. I just think that the other people that are benefiting from, that whatever solution we come up with should be based on the premise that the individual homeowner is not getting any benefit that his neighbor doesn't also get. But,
We can agree to disagree.
okay.
Steve, can I chime in a
It's
second?
up to Steve to manage the.
Let the board talk for a second, Doug, okay?
So I think we can all agree that the concept of helping our neighbors out when we do these projects is something that we want to do.
Yes.
In sewer and road projects, we've had a convenient formula at town meeting that the town kicks in 30% for some of the major infrastructure, and the homeowner does the rest. That, we might not want to think of that model, but I would argue that as we begin to do these watersheds, and we decide that we're going to do, we put out to bid for X technologies to be put in the ground in a given watershed, that we can provide either the entire box or a portion of the box so that everybody in that watershed gets exactly the same help. We're not saying that because I live in a house where upgrading my IA is going to cost $80,000, and my neighbor has a piece of property where it's only going to cost $30,000, that we should be giving a higher proportion or more money to one of those households than the other. I think we can come up with a plan that lets us, once we decide what our watershed plan is, that we can think about contributing something that is tangible to each homeowner that is absolutely equal.
can I respond to that? Yeah, I don't want to start moving too soon into how you solve this. I'm just talking about the basic premise. And I just wanted to say that what I'm saying now has nothing to do with the benefits of mass purchasing. Mass purchasing can still occur. Drop shipping can still occur. The mass test center SUP can still occur. All those good efficiencies. We're just talking about what should be the financial burden on the homeowners. I absolutely agree with you. You want to get mass purchasing and standardization, or the mass test center is going to climb the wall trying to manage all these different systems. See, they're smiling about it already. And I just think as much as possible should be carried by all the taxpayers, and but for instance, the landscaping costs will still be significant, and the hassle of having it there.
So we're going to eventually get to the Wild Harbor geo-boundary presentation in a little bit. There's roughly 1,700 parcels in that presentation that would be required to upgrade to IA. If I'm using $30,000 for an IA system, it's 100% subsidy. That's over $50 million just to do Wild Harbor.
Okay.
Okay? So we've got a lot of these to do. And on one side, there's a little bit of practicality because Ed's sitting in the back there, and if I tell him that, we're gonna recommend 100% subsidy, and that means the town's gotta find $450 million because of the number that we're gonna require in all of these watersheds, it's gonna be a non-starter for accepting 100% subsidy. That's all. I'm just putting that out there. Okay?
I've already spoken, we all call Ed, hear good advice.
Yes.
The town would not be the secret sauce is to figure, and Ed, give Ed credit for this, is to figure out how not to waste the 60% subsidy from the state. Okay, as long as we'll pretend the state isn't listening here. I don't think we're going to.
But that's only 60% of the cost. The
Yeah.
state subsidy is 60%.
Right, and I don't know whether that includes landscaping.
That's
No?
not.
Well, it includes to a maximum of $30,000, and I don't think you can get one put in and have any landscaping done for $30,000.
Until Mass
So-
Test Center does clever bulk purchasing, but I'm just.
Yeah.
All right.
Can-
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I'm very frustrated here, and I'd really like to kind of clear the air. First of all, betterments will never be involved with the IA installation, because a betterment implies that we're charging the homeowner extra for something that we're not providing. We're never going to demand that the homeowner put in an IA system and then turn around and say, well, we're going to charge you $20,000 or $1,000 extra.
That's
So-
just
Wait,
semantics.
let me finish, Steve.
Okay.
Because a betterment implies the municipality or whichever entity is providing a service, whether it's a sidewalk or a sewer line or a paved road, that's charged to the adjacent, the benefiting homeowners. We're never going to do that with IA. Subsidy is the flip side of that question, which is given that we're requiring people to do something that's going to have a financial impact, do we want to help with that cost? Right. Now, going even farther back, I would like to see written down exactly which questions we've been charged with answering. I thought the idea was, first of all, do we think these people should be subsidized? Do we need to call a vote on that and decide that's point one? Point two is, we need to present the equivalent of an executive summary with bulleted points on it that we can agree to. Then we can play the game. The 60%, just for starters, only applies to owner-occupied principal residences. And that's gonna make our budget projection kind of crazy, because we're gonna have to pick apart each of our geo-boundary areas and say, 40% of the houses here are second homes. So they're not gonna get that benefit, but that's the decision farther down the line. But I think we, in an effort to move this whole thing forward, we need, first of all, to see if the committee agrees that we should subsidize those homeowners that we're putting this burden on. And then we'll pick apart the pieces and say it's worth helping out in this case, but not in that case.
I totally agree.
I'll be quiet.
I think we're all in agreement. I have heard nobody say that we should not subsidize
Exactly.
these various systems, be it IA, UD, sewers. I think that's unanimous across the
Right.
board. Now we're just nitpicking what percentage. And I don't know if we have to solve that soon or not, but at least the subsidy part of it, I think we're all in unanimous support of.
Right, I think.
Doug?
Hi, Doug Brown, Select Board. So I just wanted to point, we all have this looming mandate from the state hanging over our heads. It's all gonna cost all of us something. If you're in a sewer area, it's probably gonna cost you more. If you're in an IA area, it's gonna cost you something. If you use urine diversion, maybe you'll pay less than anybody. But that's a looming cost that's hanging over everybody on the Cape right now. So there's your value, because you're relieving that burden for the person that owns the home. And whether it's for that person or the next buyer, you've solved the problem, which is hanging over their head. So there is a value.
But no, it's, the value is just as much to the person who puts in the system as to the person, as it is to the person in the same watershed who doesn't have to put in a system with a watershed plan, but would have to if that mandate from DEP went the other way and we didn't do watershed plans and everybody had to put one in.
Well, there's just not going to be very many of those people. Only the ones that are on the immediate ocean coast are flushing to the ocean. Anybody that's in a watershed.
No, you will stay for, Kristen will be
Okay, well, we'll
showing you
see.
maps of.
I'm just saying, there is a value, and it's not really the town that's mandating it, we're just delineating it. The state has already mandated it.
Keep it simple.
Right, it's a state mandate. Yeah, Warren?
Well, there's no hurry on this. I mean,
Well, yeah, there is a hurry.
Yes.
We have to do our watershed plans in accordance with something we laid out there, but.
I mean, it
we-
doesn't
we-
have
we
to be
need to-
solved tonight.
No, it doesn't have to be solved tonight, but we have to keep moving and not wait 5 years to take action.
Oh, yes.
Sorry to cut you off, Corin.
It's okay, no, it's right. Corin Peterson, Buzzards Bay Coalition. There are benefits to the homeowner for installing an IA system, real benefits to the homeowner. If you do an IA system, you get a reduction in field, so that is a benefit, that's a real tangible benefit to the homeowner for infrastructure on your property. So sometimes if you do an IA system, it's a smaller leach field than if you'd had to do a Title V.
I'm not following. What's the benefit?
The smaller leach fields. So
More area freedom.
my understanding is that your argument was that there is no benefit to the homeowner.
Oh, and you're saying if you have an IA, you can get away with a smaller leach field?
Yes. Yes, the
Is
Board
that
of Health
true?
has permitted it in this town before.
Yes.
And
Yeah, so I'm gonna have to, so you right now have a 3-bedroom house, you have a leaching field size for a 3-bedroom house. You get mandated to put an IA system in now, your leach field's probably good for 4 bedrooms, maybe 5.
you're looking for a real tangible benefit to a homeowner with an IA system, that's one of them. So I
Thank
just
you.
wanted
That's
to-
the first really good objection to my thing.
That's why Corin comes to these meetings.
I'm gonna leave now.
Yeah, Matt.
Matt Hanley from Surfrider Foundation. Mr. Layton, can we get some are you for the subsidy or against the subsidy? It seems like you're presenting a philosophical question that really has no answer. And, for the audience and the town members that are watching us home,
I'm for
is there a
100%
point to
subsidy.
this discussion this topic that you've brought up? Like, are you for subsidy or against it?
For.
Excellent, excellent. Then I guess the next better business would be at what percentage?
He wants 100%.
You want 100%.
I don't want to pay for landscaping because You know, oh, I want it over there next to my petunias, you know, I mean, that's gotta be up to the homeowner.
No, I think that's fair. I think that's a fair, assessment, and the town doesn't want to be paying for people's landscape. And I think the bread and butter is what we should be focusing on, is the system itself that's being mandated if you're in a geo-boundary, and which is being mandated by the state. And the betterment to the town is that, having these systems is going to alleviate some of their responsibility in areas, like some of the board members said, like, that are more problematic, like North Falmouth and West Falmouth with the moraine area, with the large boulders and stuff like that, and the houses are further apart. So the town is benefiting from these IA systems, and obviously the town should be paying for part of this cost, because it's taking nutrients out of these watersheds, which is not equal to a sewer, but has a similar effect
Oh,
in some of
absolutely.
these more challenging areas.
Thank you, yes.
So, all right, thank you.
Any further comments? Yes? Earl?
Do you won't have to worry about it.
Earl Barnhart, Green Center. I was interested in your landscaping comments. When you think about paying the homeowner for the cost of the landscape, you think about putting stuff in afterwards, which is highly variable. But often when they put an IA in a backyard, they have to dig all the way through the right side and cut trees down that are big trees are very expensive. You might consider subsidizing people for that kind of a cost to the landscape that they have to do and is not optional.
But, Earl, think about this. The more we subsidize IAs, the less attractive UDs look.
Move the question along.
Yeah,
I couldn't resist that.
right. So everybody's got Steve's latest document. I don't think we need to take a vote, Tom. I mean, the sense of this board of subsidies are appropriate. And I would task everybody to sort of start from Steve's, you get 100%, and everybody think about this creatively about, I mean, I sit here and I say, if we said that every homeowner would get a maximum of, I'll just use a number, $8,000 towards the cost of putting in an IA system, okay? So if you get a system for $30,000, you're gonna get 8. If you get a system for 40, you're gonna get 8. So it kind of drives the homeowners or others to try to find a good deal. And then if you've got a principal residence, so we've got to put this thing together a little bit, Steve. Like, if you're a principal residence, you get the state tax credits. This is what it would, this is what it might
Well,
cost.
I'm waiting to hear back from Ed and the town council, too.
So that would be, one thing that would be useful to me in thinking about this is if we could put together 2 or 3 or 4, however many scenarios, on terms of the eligibility for the tax credit, cost of the system, how does it all shake out? And it's unclear to me, I think Tom raised a very good point about the betterment showing up on your, sewer bill is, I'm not sure that's appropriate, but what we're really talking about is how much subsidy versus how much the general taxpayer has to bear.
Yeah, it's a semantic thing. A subsidy
Yeah, it is a
is
semantic.
100% minus
It
the
is a
betterment.
semantic thing, and that was my one comment on reading your epistle here, was there's a lot of semantics in there about betterments and worsements, and I don't think any of that is relevant. I think what we want to talk about more is what's the fair formula for, and then to understand that, because it is such a different thing than putting in a sewer, it would be nice to know a little more about these forms of, assistance, possibility of the AquaFund, all these things that can come into play to defray the cost.
I just want one real quick. The AquaFund is a zero interest loan.
I understand.
No, I just want to,
Yes, AquaFund can be 0% interest. There's an income qualification that goes with that, but it's a tiered interest rate.
But that's what I'm saying, it's so complicated. It's hard, So we almost need like 5 case histories,
Yeah,
okay.
well, that's
You're
what I'm
making 100,000 a year, you're making 20,000
You and I are on the
a
same
year.
page. I'm saying we all go home and do our homework and try to think of the different examples or cases or whatever. And, you know, we'll start sticking some numbers. If you're a second homeowner, blah, 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 this is what it might cost you, and you might only get some money from the
Right,
town or not.
right.
And we'll put that together. We're at 6 o'clock, we get out of here at 6:30, we have one more big chunk to go through at this meeting.
I just
Quick
have
question.
one,
If Brian.
Tom had his
Oh,
finger up first.
Go ahead.
no, the other part of my question was, first of all, what question or questions are we specifically charged with answering? But what is the timeline for our response?
Well, I would say when we come back to the next meeting, there's gonna be an item that's gonna say continued discussion on recommendations.
Right, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, no, but what I'm just saying is, rather than us sitting here to now and say, well, what if you were like an elderly person or, you know, a
Yeah, no, I
veteran?
don't
all
wanna
those-
go
all
there.
those. But we should all be trying to think of the different variables that might
Well,
be
yeah,
come
I've
into
done
play.
some of that already.
Some of it's in here.
Preparation for today.
And I would say we're not paying for rose bushes.
Yeah, I agree, I think we probably all agree on
I
that.
think we all agree on that.
All those who agree that we're not paying for rose bushes signify by nodding their head. Okay,
Bobbleheads,
Quick-
a room full of
Quick
bobbleheads.
request to Brian. Could you send me, and maybe all of us, something about the extent to which leach fields get smaller when IA systems go in?
yeah, if you send it, Kristen, she'll distribute it to the board, that'd be great, yeah. I didn't misspeak when, what, did I mean, some of the systems have, allow a smaller area. One of the things I don't quite understand is, if you have an existing one, if they'll let you repurpose it, but I think you can. I think you can, okay, yeah, all right. All right, closing the discussion, and we're gonna move on to Wild Harbor. Sounds like a wonderful place.
It is a wonderful
Kristen Rathjen, Science Wares. So we're gonna just keep on plugging along here. Wild Harbor, this is the last one on the Buzzards Bay side. So this one is a lot more challenging, as those of you who saw the presentation can tell. So Steve said there's 1,700 parcels in the watershed, about 1,400 are single-family residents. Since the MEP, the new development is 77 parcels. The big thing in this watershed is that the new Silver Beach wastewater treatment facility it's in the watershed. It has a groundwater discharge permit for 10 milligrams per liter, and it discharges back into the watershed. So when we're doing the calculations and looking at IAs performing at 10 milligrams per liter, it doesn't matter whether we would sewer or put an IA in, it would be the same removal. The two surface water bodies in the watershed are Wing Pond and Dam Pond, and their attenuation and respective outflows are there. Buzzards Bay Coalition Health Index score basically rates it as a fair condition watershed. The MEP numbers, again, this is what the TMDL is based off of. MEP breaks it out into 3 sub-embayments: Wild Harbor River, and Dam Pond Stream. So this is another watershed like West Falmouth where the sewer credit got baked into the build-out calculation. And the reason for that is because the treatment plant didn't come online until 2009, and the discharge under the soccer fields at the school is more than 10 years away from, the travel time is more than 10 years. So there would be no impact to the present loading conditions when the MEP was finalized. So they took the potential nitrogen reduction from that sewering and put it in the build-out calculation. The Cape Cod Commission, their planning tool says that the total present removal, and that includes the sewering, is about 5,300 kilograms per year. So quite a difference from what the MEP calculated.
Say that again?
5,300
No, but
kilograms total.
Where did that come from?
Based on how they're calculating the loading to the watershed. Because they do it in a similar way, but it's slightly different, and they are also using updated water use numbers and potentially more parcels since the time of the MEP. So, but again, the TMDL, the state mandated nitrogen reduction requirement, is what is in the MEP. But the Cape Cod Commission, it just presents another way to look at maybe how some of the land use has changed, how growth has impacted, and another way to look at loading the closest way to the way the MEP was done, based on water use. So this is from the Cape Cod Commission. They break it into two sub-embayments, just the main basin for Wild Harbor and the river. They don't separate Dam Pond out, and that's how they're breaking out what the load reduction requirements are. So looking at the average water use for single-family residents from the MEP versus the MVP is pretty similar. The MVP is actually less, so that's the number I used for generating the potential nitrogen reduction values. So for the average reduction for every single-family home, 3.1 kilograms. Again, that's the same for if those got sewered in that watershed. So for that, to meet the MEP targets, we'd need to upgrade 814 homes between the main basin and Wild Harbor River. Looking at it the same way with the MVP numbers, that's saying about 1,700 homes. Again, that's just for comparison of how those different loading models are calculated. This is the Buzzards Bay Coalition, some of the monitoring data from the Sentinel station. See, it hasn't really changed over time. Even with the small sewering that was done for New Silver Beach, there has not been a noticeable change in water quality at the Sentinel station. For reference, the Sentinel station is right here, kind of at the mouth of the Little Basin. So this is the proposed geo-boundary based on the MEP reduction requirements. So up in the upper portion, about 515 homes, and then in the river portion, another 500 homes. Of that, it's about 1,000 parcels and about 870 single-family residents within there. So to show the IA lot size screening that I did a long time ago, this is kind of what the lot size look like. Anything in green may be a little on the small side to handle an IA. That's just there for consideration because people ask. So looking at how those nitrogen reduction numbers work out, if the geo-boundary is upgraded for the MEP numbers, you would meet your reduction targets for the Wild Harbor River sub-embayment, but not the main basin. Under the MVP numbers, it's pretty far off. With the non-single family residential parcels, if I look at the individual water use for each of those parcels, for the commercial, multifamily, the addition to that would be another 64 kilograms in the main sub-embayment and another 356 in the river. So the big things here, total nitrogen removal for the geo-boundary, according to MEP numbers, you would meet it, but not for the individual sub-embayments. But that's not a requirement of the TMDL. One of the other big things for this watershed is that there are 2 golf courses in it, and the MEP actually has a whole separate column for golf course fertilizer in this watershed. So the golf course fertilizer load is 13% of the controllable nitrogen load. Applying the generic 25% fertilizer reduction credit to the golf course may not be applicable because there's nothing in the bylaw that requires a golf course to actually reduce fertilizer unless they're in a wetland resource area. If they did, it would be a 300 kilogram reduction. So looking at If you do, golf course and non-golf course, another 600, and then shellfish, the full-scale aquaculture plan, shellfish, the suitable areas were found right here in the mouth of Wild Harbor River. So that's proposed area for shellfish. Basically, the proposed IA district for Wild Harbor is about 68% of the unsewered parcels that are already in that watershed. So that's Wild Harbor. And then because that's the end of the Buzzards Bay side, this is what the proposed IA geoboundaries look like for the watersheds on Buzzards Bay. This is what was presented. The pink parcels are parcels where there are already IAs present.
And the bright blue is where you plan to require them.
Yes.
And the others are the people that don't have the hassle of the system on their land.
So the table of how that breaks out is, here are the number of parcels, the bright blue parcels that are in those proposed geoboundaries. How many of them are single-family homes? This column is from the MEP of how much nitrogen needs to be reduced to meet the TMDL. And then what all of the septic upgrades, both single-family residents, using the conservative approach, plus the non-single-family residential parcels. So you can see for Megansett, we don't meet it, but we talked about it because the surface water at the Sentinel Station, that's a healthy estuary. We're meeting it for the other impaired ones for the total for the watersheds, except Quissit. Again, because the surface waters are in pretty good condition there. So nitrogen reduction as a total for the watersheds are being met under those proposed geoboundaries, but not necessarily in every sub-embayment.
Got it.
That's it.
Good job as always. My first sort of comment is, you highlight that there is currently a bylaw relative to fertilizer use, which is tied to proximity to certain water bodies. I would suggest we should look at and consider how to amend that so that that fertilizer bylaw would apply to the NSAs going forward, so that things like the golf course aren't.
The golf course is a blatant exemption in that bylaw.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just saying, just as you're talking, realizing that that bylaw is written up for a certain thing, we're
Right.
learning a lot more.
Right.
The other one, and it's not in your purview to tackle this at this point, but I would say as we move forward into actually writing the plans, Wild Harbor itself begs for somebody to look at, do you increase the area that's sewered? Increase the capacity at the treatment plant and pump the effluent to the outfall, okay? That's beyond
Yep.
the scope of what you need to do right now, but that has to be checked off, that's not
Absolutely.
a better option than all of these, okay? So, I'll start to my far right.
Ken?
I mean, this is, like all the others, it's a good start on
Yeah.
what we need to do. You raise a good point about, I hadn't considered the possibility of expanding the sewer treatment
I think
facility.
as we do the watershed plan,
Yeah.
that's an element that we can't just
Yeah, and that
say we
might,
didn't look at it. We may look at it and say it's way more than the cost of the subsidies for the IAs or whatever, but
Right,
we
right.
should take a look at that, because at the end of the day, it's not a big amount of
well,
flow.
especially because a number of these parcels that Kristen pointed out
They're very close.
are too small.
Yeah, there's
I just keep looking.
I will admit too, when I first started living in Falmouth, I was living in, New Silver Beach. Okay, so
So you're part of the problem.
I'm aware of how small the lots are, yes, yes.
Your idea also has the advantage that you don't offend anyone in Buzzards Bay, because you're taking nitrogen that would have gone into Buzzards Bay and you're making it much less and putting it back into Buzzards Bay. You're not bringing it in from an eastern.
And we're gonna put it in Vineyard Sound. That's
I-
okay.
I wasn't even gonna go down, I just think there's an exercise in
Yeah.
comparing
Yeah,
cost to
you're
cost.
absolutely right, I'm just having fun.
Okay. Ed?
Just one comment, I think going forward, we've gone through a number of watersheds. And I think it would be instructive to have a chart with the running total of, here's the watersheds we have looked at.
That's what this last one.
That's what the last page was.
Not just Buzzards Bay, but the entire thing.
You haven't turned the
Now,
20 yet.
Can I finish?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Steve's are all alike. And show a running total of the number of single-family residences in that watershed and the number that's in the geo-boundary, just to compare the
Put
two.
your last
And here's
table.
where we are.
That's not the total single-family in the watershed. He wants that column added as well.
Right, I want to see another
What the
column.
proportion
but
is.
a running total of all of the watersheds as we, so you add to it as we complete one.
Yep.
So from a town-wide perspective, as we present this to the select board and the town in general, here is the magnitude of the beast that we have to conquer.
I can do that.
But
I think it would be
I'm
instructive.
confused, why is this not that total?
So this is the total number of parcels within the geo boundary.
Okay,
And this is the number of single-family homes in the geo boundary. What Ed wants is how many single-family homes are in that watershed, to see what portion of the single-family homes are going to be required to upgrade.
I got you.
So, and that's in individual presentations, so it's an easy number to
Right,
pull out.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good
But
one.
we're talking about having to upgrade 1,748
Parcels,
parcels
Yeah.
with some kind of an IA.
yes.
At 10 milligrams per liter
Yes.
performance, right?
Yes.
So this is, again, this is a geo boundary for that area that we know will have to do something. It could be bigger as we get into the actual plan that we have to write at some point, because we'll know more about whether we've got multiple systems at 10 or whether we've got multiple systems at 12.
Yeah.
And it also goes back to solving the MEP TMDL equation to meet that number, or maybe the Cape Cod Commission numbers where they're saying there's more loading than what the MEP thinks. Maybe you have to expand to get there.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Steve?
Great job, Kristen. I mean, if we didn't have you, can you imagine this group arguing over this? No, I don't want to imagine that,
Please don't go there.
including me. On Wild Harbor, the number of parcels in the geo boundary is 1,000. And I think you said that the number in the watershed is, the Wild Harbor water, is something like
1,700.
1,700. How many are sewered?
230.
Okay, so there's still 800 that will be neither, right, approximately?
Yes.
And so that's something to keep in mind. And can you go back to the map of Wild Harbor? Is all of the white sewered?
Yes,
All
that's the-
three major areas?
No, just this part right here.
Okay, but
That's
then,
where-
all right,
that's
then
the
see
sewer.
note the one out by Buzzards Bay or whatever that harbor is there, the long, you're almost there, yes, that area, and the big area to the
Not in the
east of
watershed.
that.
It's not in the watershed.
Right.
They're in different
Those are
watersheds.
direct discharge areas.
The
Exactly.
watershed boundary.
But they're in the same area, and they are near the estuaries. It makes the neighborhood nice. But go back to the big chunk in the middle there. No, not that one, the one southeast of it.
This
No,
chunk?
go east, go east.
East. That way,
East.
east. This. So this is the Dam Pond sub-watershed. So the reason that there's none in here
Goes through the pond.
is because there is a 50% attenuation by Dam Pond, and it's only there's a 45% attenuation by Dam Pond. So it's even further reducing the benefit of the IA to the estuary.
I'm
So
sure you're right, so those.
Would benefit
right.
the pond, but the estuary, and that's the trade-off
Yeah,
of
no,
the
you're absolutely
freshwater
right.
pond versus
I'm
the
not
estuaries.
criticizing any of your numbers. I'm just pointing out that that's a big chunk of houses that look pretty much just as close to the estuaries as a lot of those blue lots.
Right.
It's not like the blue lots are right on the waterfront or anything.
Well, most of
And they're, I mean, it should be obvious to everybody in this room what axe I'm grinding here.
Yes, it is.
We've
Your
beaten it to
subtlety
the-
is overwhelming.
Yeah, that those people don't have the opportunity to be forced to spend $30,000 or $40,000 unsubsidized.
That kind of depends on what the Freshwater Ponds Committee decides and whether there's a boundary on other surface
But there's no
waters.
state mandate now. I don't need to say anymore. Thank you.
John?
Listen, if people will look at that sewer service area in there, when we laid that out, those 230 properties were, for health reasons, unable to get distance to groundwater to put in Title V systems. We were putting in mounded systems that were 4 feet concrete bunkers in there.
Yeah.
And so on the eastern side of that, there's a street, and that's where the elevation goes up. So we cut off the eastern boundary right there. That's where the elevation goes up, so that the little teeny houses to the east of that can put Title V's in because they can get distance to groundwater. Now, one of the other points that I wanted you to see, if you look in the middle of that sewer service area, there's quite a big wetland. And that wetland, I believe, has a drainage pipe that goes right into that little boat basin,
Yes, it does.
directly
It does.
to the west.
Yes.
And the Sentinel station sits right at the mouth of that boat
Right
basin.
there.
Yep.
If we were to divert that drain so that it went out into the Wild Harbor proper, Wild Harbor itself probably has a water quality that does not differ significantly from Buzzards Bay.
Yep.
So we're penalizing the hell out of ourselves by having a Sentinel station right at the mouth of this little boat basin, and then by draining that big central area into it. If we simply took that pipe and diverted it, and there are plenty of right-of-ways through streets, and there are parcels right on the beach that had houses before the hurricane of '38, and they got washed away. And so there were blank parcels there where you could effectively take that pipe and run it out into
So
Wild Harbor.
I suggest, much like I threw out that we should look at whether we expand the sewer area, that should be part of the plan.
Should be something that we should look at.
Right, yes.
Look at.
Yep.
Are there measurements of what's in the pipe effluent?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of either.
Tom, you want to comment?
It's a great, really, really good start. And again, it keeps me thinking about the enormous size of
The scale.
complexity of this
scale of what we're up
problem
against.
moving forward, and I'm not sure it is scalable, and I'll get back to that in a moment, I think, when you ask for comments from staff, if we have time.
We got 6 minutes. Jonathan?
I guess I'm concerned about the lot size being right on the boundary of being able to accommodate IAs.
Right.
Do we know how much flexibility there will be? Is it one tank size fits all for IAs, or is there some ability to manufacture something that's a little smaller but still can do the job? I know that's not a question for you,
Every
but
technology is different. If you see right here, there's an IA on this teeny tiny lot right here. So when I did the lot screening size, it was based on some measurements of one of the higher performing IA technologies. So,
I'm going to
But
try. I'm gonna
if
try-
you put an IA in, your leach field can be smaller.
correct.
I'm going to try.
So there
yeah,
you get the room.
I'm going to try to answer your question. A number of these small lots probably don't have Title V systems right now. So
Probably
they,
cesspools.
okay, they're like, I'd give it a 50-50 shot that they got a cesspool, because that's what was in the area that got sewered, okay? So the conundrum is this: the lot's probably big enough, but they're gonna have to take out a lot of landscaping to fit it in, okay? They're probably gonna have to rip up that small driveway, put a portion of it under the small driveway, take down that one tree in the backyard, okay? So it'll get ugly.
so is
Okay.
that the argument for sewering then?
It's a factor, yes, okay? If there's comments from the audience, I'll give everybody a shot, but, go ahead, Hildy.
UD.
Hilda from the Green Center. So the objective is to get as much nitrogen out as soon as possible, right? That's what we're trying to do. And some of the houses, we happen to know, might be on this plan where they need an IA. However, we should check on every house what their effluent is right now. Because in some cases, their effluent might be extremely low in nitrogen because they're hardly ever there. I know big houses with one person part of the time. Well, you're gonna make them do the IA, they can probably afford it, but they don't make any difference in the outcome. And we're trying to do as much nitrogen removal as possible, as quick as possible. So why do those people that might not have any real effect on the nitrogen loading, we should just make sure that we make a decision on who's gonna be done so we get the work done.
I would just say, part of that's taken into account because we're using actual water records. So if somebody's only there a very small amount of time, we're using a small amount of water.
Yeah, but the water and then the amount of nitrogen, like somebody can be very conservative in water and have a ton of nitrogen because.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but I mean.
No, but if that was the case, the map wouldn't look like that. There'd be weird spots all over the place.
But the other thing is, those houses could turn over tomorrow, and
That's-
then there's
And then-
a family of 12 moves in, you know.
Two
But they
years
have
from
to-
now, this elderly
have to make
person
such-
living
that
there by themselves
Yeah.
passes on, and
Yeah.
a family of
Trying
6 or
to
8 or whatever moves in.
Make sure that we make it as efficient
It's a
as
good comment.
possible.
It's a good comment. Okay. I would entertain a motion to skip over reports of members and staff. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. We have minutes of the prior meeting. As usual, I think they're well done. Tom?
Yeah, and I'm pleased with the change we made from the minutes from the 10th, so can we approve both sets of minutes on one motion?
Let's do the 10th first, okay?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so do I have a motion to accept the minutes from the 10th?
Also
I
move.
have two comments.
Have a
Second.
Okay? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Did you abstain because you were here, right?
No, I, did I?
I thought you were here, that's why I thought you.
Yeah, no, I
I thought
didn't.
you said I
I
wasn't
got
here.
distracted. I didn't
Okay,
abstain.
sorry. All right. The minutes of the 24th, any comments?
Look good,
We're good?
as presented.
I'm going to give the gentleman to your left there a chance to make a motion.
I motion to accept the minutes.
Anybody want to second that?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying
Aye.
aye. All right, we have a motion for which there can be no debate. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor signify by
Aye.
saying aye. Well done.
Aye.